welcome, Formicast fans, to another episode of Formicast Podcast, your source for everything ant keeping. Today, we are doing something special. We're doing a Betterment of ant keeping series, and we're starting this series with Canada. And so I have two of my partners from Canada, Portmore Art and Canada Ant Colony. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
And
Zach says hi.
Zach says hi. Zach is there somewhere. He's currently driving. But yes, I did shave. I was fixing up my mustache, and it completely messed it up, so I had to shave it. So. Alright, so we're going to do something a little bit different for this series. So instead of me talking my head off and me leading the show and how everything is going to go, we're actually going to do it a little bit different. So how this is going to be is the mic is going to be open for my Canadian friends here, and I'm going to let them take the show. So, Lexi, Yair, Zach, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm not quite sure if Zach can speak. Zach Attack?
Zach Attack. Folks,
Zach
this is... there he is.
No, he's left us.
There's connectivity issues there, so...
Oh, well, I guess... I guess the ant keeping hobby has grown a bit in Canada, at least since the pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic was definitely a huge sort of accelerator to the hobby. There was already a bit of a movement going on before the pandemic, but the pandemic definitely accelerated things. You know, people had a lot of free time in a way, right? I mean, not saying that it was fortunate, but but some of us did end up, and that ended up with a lot of people entering the hobby. So I think that's exactly what happened to us. We had the time to enter the hobby during the pandemic and work in developing all these ideas and whatnot. So that was good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah.
All right, great. For some reason, I don't know why, it didn't work on browser, phone, and phone browser. So here we are. Sorry about that.
Cool. How you got it working this time?
All right.
sorry,
we were talking about how much the hobby has grown in Canada as of late, especially since the pandemic.
Yeah, I see. I'm not sure to what extent this relates, this would mirror your experiences. I feel like in the initial few years of the hobby, there was a lot of people coming in, but I feel like the retention on that isn't so high, and I feel like especially in 2023, that's kind of like plateaued out. It's still growing at a really fast rate. It's just growing at the same speed it's just closer to the same speed as it was before the pandemic than it is after. Because for me, at least, I noticed a huge jump right in the first 6 months. Would that reflect your guys' experience?
Yeah, in a way, yes. But I have never been able to take that as a valid data point. I see it more as a guessing data point, and the main reason for that has more to do with the economy, right? So, some people are basically saying, and this is a fact, the cost of living is going up very, very much, especially here in Canada and in certain areas. There are a lot of things that are costing a lot of money, way more money. Plus the housing market, people that have debts or interest rates being applied, and so this is putting a bit of a strain in a lot of families. And you would assume that then people would spend less money on things that are not necessarily basic, right? I mean, you have to buy food. You have no choice but to buy food or die. And you may be able to skip buying an ant colony, supplies for an ant colony, and you may not die if you skip that, right? So
May not.
So
Unless you're like super freaky.
so but if we look at the latest report from the Bank of Canada, well, I'm not 100% sure if it was the Bank of Canada, the source, but I believe it has to do with the interest rates. They were talking about the fact that even though they've been raising the interest rates and trying to combat inflation and demand and whatnot, they are not really seeing people slowing down on spending on things that are relevant, buying things that consider luxury items or not so necessary. So a part of me saying, no, this year could be better, stronger, and we wouldn't be struggling with money. But then on the other side of the equation, the business is still growing, it's not shrinking down, and there is more people entering the market. Bank as people still spending money, and the economy is still somewhat rolling. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think it's a little bit hard to use that information and be 100% certain that the hobby is growing at the fair rate, or the hobby is growing but not as much as it could, just simply because the economy is a bit funky.
Right.
But I think Zachary mentioned something that is very important, which has to do with the retention rate, which is, yes, we do have a lot of people entering the hobby, but why are they not staying longer than we think they should, right? If an ant colony can live many years to come, then why is the average ant keeper staying in the hobby, let's say 1 year or less, right? Like, what's going on with those ant colonies? What's going on with them?
I'm pretty sure we were supposed to touch base on that a little bit later, but I mean, we can talk about it now.
I heard the word retention from Zachary's story. My brain went there.
I guess for me, one last thing to add on that wouldn't be retention. I think I'd agree with
Sasha.
Yara's, I guess, sentiment that it's really hard to make an assessment of how the hobby is growing right now, and that's just because there's so many weird factors, and it's like just a weird time for the economy in general. This is just something that I've gleaned from talking to a lot of pet stores. Since Canada Colony, we also work in like the wholesale sphere, so there's pet stores that stock like ant colonies, and they're taking from us. But it seems like during, well, at least what I've been hearing is that during the initial years of the pandemic, there was a huge boom in basically everything, and now, at least for a lot of stores, it's considerably slowed down. Where, like, for example, now I know there's issues where a lot of pet stores have had to lay off a lot of their staff just because they were in for the huge increase in demand. But now, since people have gone back to work and there's not as many people, I guess, putting in everything their pets, or especially getting new pets, just because, again, this is only what I've heard secondhand, but just because it is so much more expensive, it sounds like a lot of people are still maintaining, and that's something that is a little bit different for ant keeping. But
yeah,
I would say that I've heard about growth being that generally pets has been growing, but right now at the moment a little bit slower than it could be, at least as compared to I guess the last 3 years or so.
Well, a lot of people had a lot of time in their hands during the pandemic, right? Like we were stuck at home watching YouTube videos half the time, right? So, and as we all know, Ants Canada is the gateway into ant keeping. And so with a lot of YouTubing, I'm pretty sure he appeared in many people's feed, and that's how we ended up with a whole bunch of ant keepers that maybe were only in it for the duration of the lockdown, or maybe a little bit after that. Then when they got back to busy life, they were like, I can't deal with this, and that kind of stuff. So that is also why you see a lot of the turnaround. I'm going back. But I also feel like that's maybe why we seeing that big, and then now slow down a little bit, but it's still growing. We're still seeing join the hobby. Some stick around, some don't. Businesses pop up. They don't stick around. Some do. But it's encouraging to see people trying it out and kind of changing their way.
You guys are cutting in and out a little bit.
How about now?
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you guys now. Yeah, it was just cutting in and out a little bit.
All right, cool.
Quality audio, noise reduction thing.
Probably.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that big growth, and then now people are busy. Either way, still seeing a growth, and it's encouraging changing their mindset.
I am sorry, yep. Do you have something to say?
Okay, I also think for us it's really hard to diagnose the overall health of the market because we for example, just said the pandemic had a lot of people go into the hobby and then it slowed down. But for us, if we just look at our business, inside of our business, and we ignore everything outside of it, we cannot also say that. For us, it's the opposite. This year, in particular, this summer, is the strongest sales we have ever seen. The most quantity of customers, not just the most quantity of customers, but the average amount of money spent per transaction, right, per order, has gone up considerably, like 30 to 40%. That's a lot.
And that's if we take away spiders. Like if we're just looking at the ants.
Looking at the ants. The spider category also because that is adding up to more sales, but it's also bringing customers that cross up. So there's people that like spiders and then they find out the ant equipment and then they end up both. Or there's people that went to us at some point for ant supplies and then all of a sudden they're discovering spider stuff and then they end up crossing over to that side. And we even have stories of people that it's funny because we have couples, so something like us, we're a couple, and we are. You discovered that today?
What?
What?
Only on Formicast podcast.
Only exclusive. So it's funny because she is the one that takes care of most of the spiders. And I am the one that is looking more after the situation with the ants. So the same reality applies to our customers. Our orders for ants, and again, we don't know why we're not saying it, but we cannot stop noticing that 90 or 80% of the customers for ant keeping supplies are males, and 90% or 80% of the orders for spider supplies are females. And there are certain stories of couples where we have feedback where, hey, my wife buy the husband buy your ant keeping. I'm like, what? So that's really cool. So again, for us, we cannot say the ant keeping hobby is slowing down because we have seen an impressive growth. But that is because we're a brand new business. I still consider us as a brand new business. We 3-year mark. So a 3-year-old business still in its infancy, right? So if we don't see that growth, then I guess we're not doing things. But the good thing is that we're noticing that very, very aggressively.
Yeah, so we can't really say if that growth is because of the community growing or just awareness that we're around,
Yeah,
right?
business
So,
growth.
um,
And then for the retention, I do want to go back to the again. We're gonna keep retaining this topic, but
Right.
going back to the retention, I also think the whole factor with the YouTube videos, for example, in particular, kind of videos, does play a big factor, which is, and I see it with a lot of customers in a good way and sometimes it's a good way. What I'm trying to say is that if I watch a video that's very, very exciting, and maybe there's a bit of drama and script is elaborated to keep your attention and have you gasping, like what's gonna happen next, right? So I think that's cool, and from a video perspective on YouTube, it does a good job at keeping you there. But when those customers buy their first ant colony or hunt for, and all of a sudden reality of the hunt is just very different. In the first month, year of having an ant colony, you're not gonna see the same as what. Right, in those videos, you see some things that seem way more exciting, and the reality of things is that the hobby, when you're just getting started with a founding queen, you're not gonna have that much happening. So it's not gonna be as exciting as you thought, compared to your experience with those videos, which may explain why some people exit the hobby, because it ended up actually turning into a boring game, or sometimes it's frustrating that they just didn't know what was going on with their ants. For some people, it's very simple to observe the colony, say, oh, they need enough heat, or I'm not giving them enough food, right? But
sometimes I wonder, and this is obviously information that we really didn't actually collect, but what the split is on people staying in the hobby. They started by collecting. The split is that they started by buying, and or even kind of as a subsection of that, like what they're basically starting. Because I feel like, at least now, there has been like a relatively ant-keeping as a hobby, at least in terms of exposure to it, at least once, pretty large. And there's times where I'll talk to someone, and if for somehow ant comes up, kind of the situation, oh yeah, I tried that, I looked into it, couldn't find a quick right? And I always wonder whether that might be different. Sorry, I'm hearing something. But to what extent that might be different?
Yeah,
that's bad.
Just muted out of my.
Testing.
You got echo? Sorry.
Do I have an echo?
All right, I think it's okay now.
Sounds
yeah.
good now. Yeah, go ahead.
But I guess overall the reason that they quit, at least for me, what I suspect is the case is that it's just the reality that the way that a lot of ant keeping starts, and that is finding a queen, is really, really, really boring. Because a big colony, I think, just because there's so much more activity versus all right, catch a queen, that's if you do, and then you're sitting there for a month, nothing, well, not nothing happens, but there's no interaction at all with you. And then the first workers come out, and for some species, you're still kind of looking at them once every week, and you might be doing something with them twice a week. And it's like a queen, maybe 4 workers, and I genuinely do wonder, at least my system, that a lot of people in the first really, really inactive months of the colony, or it just fizzles out, or maybe because the colony has so few requirements, they don't take care of it as well as they could be, or because it's so small, they're not, I guess, putting in the investment on like environmental aspects of care, like tables, like live food. And I think it's kind of funny that in that sense, the survival rate of like as people in the hobby kind of mirrored the survival rate of like actual colonies in the wild, where like initially there's a lot of queens Trump and then fizzles out pretty rapidly afterwards, and then the people who have been staying in the hobby for let's say a year or two tend to be relatively more stable after. At least that's just something that I've noticed, and some of these are like guesses where I'm kind of filling in and stuff. What sounds right to me. I'm not sure how accurate that really is.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. I just had a preference at some point to I mean Lacia's Neo Niger is a very simple example for me. You know, I see the queens, they have their nuptial flight, and I'm not going to say all of them, but a huge percentage of them do not lay eggs until after diapause, right? So then they come after diapause, they finally start laying their eggs, finally the workers arrive, and then those colonies start leaving the business with workers. So my point being is, I would rather, and this has already started to happen, I would rather not put them available when they have no workers at all, and not necessarily put a priority on selling them at that stage. I would rather keep them, take care of them. It doesn't take a lot of effort to take care of them on their first few months, right? They go into diapause, that's it. You just have to wait. But I think it's more exciting for customers when they acquire that species with actual workers present, because it's going to increase the interactivity, right? It's going to be a little bit more fun or more exciting versus just buying a queen that you're just going to have there sitting down for 7 months, maybe 6, right? Depends. And it's just doing nothing. Yeah. So in general, we have observed that behavior. For us, queens that don't have any workers don't sell that often. Yeah. And I don't mind that. I actually prefer that. Plus, our ant shop does not necessarily sell any queens that are, you know, exotic or not common here in Canada. So I guess people have an opportunity to go and find those queens by themselves or somewhere else, right? And then when they don't have that, or they couldn't find them, or maybe they failed at the founding stages, then that's when they go and buy a queen that actually has workers, because it's already, let's say it's already done for you, right? That initial process of waiting.
I think we also have to educate new ant keepers to the idea that more workers, yes, is more expensive, but it's also more entertaining. So, like, there's also people that are getting an ant colony for their kids because they're interested, but they come and see the prices of a queen with 1 to 5 workers versus a queen with 25 to 50 workers. They go with the 1 to 5 because it's way cheaper.
It's cheaper, yeah.
But then their kid is like bugging it all the time because it wants to, like, you know what I mean? Like here's some food. Yeah. And they would be better off getting a bigger colony, so then there is more action, more something going on. So I think we also need to get that more out there. Like, I think we need to open communications with our customers a little bit more so that we have the opportunity to talk to parents that are just trying to help their kid get into what they like to do. So I think we need to be a little bit more interactive with those customers and those people, and not just us, but like other ant keepers that might come across with someone saying, "I'm a newbie. I just got a colony for my son." Telling them that, hey, you might have better luck with a bigger colony. Yeah.
Or patience.
Patience. Either a bigger colony or patience.
Bigger colonies also take more work too.
Yeah, doesn't necessarily fix the problem. Yeah.
Right.
I would actually one thing that I've been trying to do is kind of, as time goes by, I try to encourage, like, if anyone's looking to get a colony, to get like a large and large one. So this year, for example, just because we have like more accumulated colonies from this year and last year, it's like, all right, we have colonies consistently that have like 30 workers. That's something now that not only can survive, but that we just recommend generally, because at least from what I'm seeing, generally people that start with larger colonies, just because there's a lot more things to do and there's a lot more things to watch, tend to stay in the hobby longer.
Yeah.
I think there's this one continuing issue always though, and that's kind of the split between really experienced gamekeepers and like newbies, because the idea, like, for example, one of like the big splits I find is like queen value, because, for example, like someone who's been an Yankee for like 4 years, to them, let's say like a Camponotis queen, a Carpenter Ant queen, that is not worth much. For them, it's like, oh well, it's pretty easy to find. You to like this type of forest when it's 10 p.m. outside, bring this light, grab a fly, 20 degrees, and the humidity is da 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 da. Because for them, like, they already, I feel like Antkeeping generally has like a really high barrier to entry, just in terms of, for me, I feel like a lot of times what you get is that interactions between really experienced Antkeepers kind of assume a level of knowledge or competence that beginner Antkeepers just don't have. Like, it's the type of thing where I'm constant, like, I still probably on a daily basis deal with, okay, yeah, no, these ants, no, they don't need to be kept in the dark at all times. These ants, yes, please heat them, it will make a huge difference. Da 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 da. Right? And I think that a lot of these things are just kind of like taken for granted, especially with interaction for like experienced ant keepers and like beginner ant keepers. That also looks like I think that people that are really experienced in the hobby don't disturb their queens as much, and part of the reason is just they've seen it all 100 times before, and it's not something they're kind of actively looking for, right?
Yeah.
Even just in terms of like, I guess it's kind of ironic, but almost because they're less interested in the whole thing for them, the initial parts of starting a colony so much easier, and so the advice kind of shift to, this is so where a lot of people entering the hobby are getting in, which kind of sounds like, this is what you should do if you're an expert, but they're not experts.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's another thing that would make the community better, is to realize that people that know a whole lot about ant keeping and all these ant species, and they're really good at identifying ants and all of those things, you didn't always.
Oh my.
You know what I mean? You didn't always. So keep that in mind, because there are other people that are kind of still working that out, and you kind of just have to help each other out. Even experienced ant keepers still have things to learn, right? If they didn't, it wouldn't be a career.
I'd be polite about it.
But that is a challenge, because, and maybe I'm very wrong about this, but according to my observations, let's say at least 75% of the ant keeper community is very introvert. Mm-hmm. They don't like talking to other people. So the guy here with all this experience, who has that knowledge, is like, no, just gonna be with my ants in my house, and doesn't share that knowledge with anybody, right? And there are a few people out there that are going and they like to belong to communities, and you see them on Facebook or Discord or YouTube, and they're loud and they share their opinion. But it's not necessarily the profile of the ant keeper. Ironically, I see the spider keepers being way more communicative and more outgoing in that sense. I don't know what the difference is, and maybe I'm completely wrong about these observations, but I think that's a challenge with the ant keeping community, that in general, we ant keepers are very introvert. I mean, myself included, even though I'm here on a YouTube meeting, putting my face in front of everybody. That wouldn't necessarily be my first natural choice, you know, like I'd rather be tinkering here on the computer, trying to improve a design or figure out how to fix a 3D printer so it can do things that only I understand, you know.
And that's why I end up on, you know, the podcast and talking to customers. And I'm 95% of the time, if anyone sends us a message on our website chat or Instagram or anything like that, 95% of the time it's me replying. So we kind of patch each other's holes, I guess. And I think that's what we need from everybody as well, right? We just need to patch each other's holes. And try not to think dirty with that, because it sounds really bad.
I don't think anyone got that.
I don't know. I can see if the people. Let's move on. Let's talk about the ethical part of the hobby, and things that we need to consider. Maybe the importance of doing the right thing, not just for us, but for the ants. And what can we do to make sure that gets distributed evenly?
This is overwhelming, though, because in what perspective? Because you can talk about proper housing, right? I mean, simple example, jail and farms. But how can you stop that?
Right.
Well, let's start with.
Well, about the fireworks.
Let's start with sourcing ants. If you're not going to go and get them yourself from flights, how do you get them, and how do you ensure that you're getting it from the right person, following the right rules?
What are the rules?
To
begin with?
All of that stuff. So I think Zach has more experience with
acquiring ants. Yeah.
Acquiring ants. So I think this would probably have to go to you.
Yeah. So one really big thing that I noticed about a lot of ants, and this is really unfortunately a lot of the species that a lot of people want, is that they're just not so easy to come by. And a lot of it is because of our geography. Because, right, Canada generally, really up north, everything is cold. There's not that much biodiversity compared to a lot of other parts of the country. And so a lot of the species that everyone is for is way deep down in the southern limits of Canada. They're in habitat that's kind of been destroyed already just because, you know, the southern tip of Canada is where all the people are. So, for example, there's been a lot of species that I kind of try to map out as time goes by, and like one of these examples, been looking for these for years, to find like a native Canadian population or a native Ontario population, is Phytole prolifera. Now, Phytole prolifera, they're big-headed ant. They're super popular. Everyone loves them. But the problem is they kind of live exclusively in oak savanna, in sand prairie, in specific types of meadows. And like the simple fact is that, at least in Ontario, 99.7% of that habitat has been turned into farmland. And we have invasive species like Tetramorium immigrans specifically that suppress that. Well, let's say that there were a significant population, they would likely be suppressed by ants like Tetramorium. And so I think one of the big issues is, like, a lot of those species just can't really sustainably be collected in Canada just because they're not pure enough and not. And I would even say that it's difficult to say that they could maintain their population for long, even if they are here. And this goes, for example, like Camponotus castaneus, bright orange carpenter ants. Those are one of our most popular species, but at least in Canada, those only exist in a single park, and they're protected. So what we've been doing is basically for a lot of the species that are going to be hard to find here to collect collect sustainably rather. We're importing them from the States, from areas where they're a lot more common. I think that at least that's been a really big part for most of like the species that are in high demand. I think other aspect to it is like collecting queens or collecting colonies. I think just generally speaking, like queens is much more sustainable, and I always kind of limit the way I picture it is so the way ants reproduce. They have if a colony gets past its first few years, it's relatively stable and a large number of reproductive colonies that have a relatively low success rate. And I guess a similar reproductive biology to that would be like trees, right? Because like acorns, for example, most acorns are not going to become trees, but once they become like mature trees, they can produce like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds every single year. And in that sense, I think that like collecting ants is a lot like logging on, where collecting queens is similar to like kind of picking acorns off the ground, and collecting large mature colonies closer to cutting down a tree. And I think just a big part of that is pushing for like, all right, if colonies are just because ant keeping unfortunately right now like a very large percent of everything wild caught, I think it's just important to aim for to prioritize having colonies that were started from a single other relative non-destructive. And obviously there's exceptions where, for example, colonies are collected from areas that are about to be destroyed or areas that have been marked for, say, deforestation or construction, but or areas where super dense populations of a couple dominant. I think there's exceptions, but I think generally there should be a push as much as possible to limit collection of wild colonies, especially ones that are large or at a reproduction. One thing that we are working on is captive. I think that a lot of potential just in what that can be a hobby generally. One thing is that ants unfortunately don't seem to have a consistent yearly cycle. That is to say that this year they'll produce 600 queens and next year they'll produce 2. And I think captive has a lot of potential into this from both a business side and can have these ants be available consistently to the public, and also from obviously also from an ecological side where if we're sourcing all without anything for a while, that's going to be ideal. That's something that at least here what we've been doing, we have couples that are almost fully bred in captivity. It's just a matter of figuring out the actual conditions it takes to, because I guess both a blessing and a curse is that a lot of ant keeping has always been on almost the forefront of what's known about ants themselves, where this is something that the scientific doesn't necessarily know how to do either. And so it's a lot of understanding how ants work. Rather, this is what we're going to need a lot more of to make ant keeping fully sustainable hobby in the long term. Sorry, that was a
So-
long talk.
So, although we have used the term ant farming or ant farm for a long time, I guess in a way you're saying that we could, in a way, right, that we could move into actual farming, meaning rather than just relying on wild captures, being able to provide the proper circumstances or environments so that we can reproduce or captive breed the ants and then rely more on that. So to impact less the environment.
Yeah, and I would say that's especially for species that, like as I mentioned before, aren't so common. So that's something
Yeah.
that we're currently trying to do for Fidola. That's something where right now all of our not all of it, I would say like 90% of our Phenogasters, like the queens made in captivity. Some of them are born in captivity, but it's something that we're definitely. Same thing for like Pogon Armormex. Same thing for, I think Formica will be able to have be breeding consistently relatively soon. But it kind of is. If we can make it, we don't have to like evolve population at all, and this is especially for species in like fragile habitats. That's probably going to be the most ideal going forward, like from a sustainability.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. A huge divide or a difference on how things are expected to be done between the spider community and the ant keeping community. And I mean, I know we're more on the ant keeping side right now, but for me, when we first started to do both, it was very, very clear that things are done somewhat different, or the expectation from the customer is different, or the education or level of awareness on the customer is different. Again, I'm not saying that is right or wrong, just simply different. So, for example, when you have jumping spiders, everybody's very concerned about making sure that the jumping spiders are captive bred.
Mm-hmm.
You never see that on the ant keeping community. Like nobody ever questions if the ant was wild capture or captive bred. Literally nobody has ever asked that question.
Yeah.
But with the spider community, that's the concern right away. You know, people send you a message saying, "Hey, do you have spiders for adoption?" And then right away the next question is this captive bred or wild capture, right? So which one is it? Yeah, I was also reading a lot on groups, especially on Facebook, people concerned about the fact that there are species of spiders that are being imported, and they're questioning why are they being imported, where are they being imported from, how do we know that they're legally imported or ethically sourced and whatnot. And again, you go to the ant keeping community, don't really see a lot of people talking about that, right? So again, not saying that is right or wrong, but really what I'm observing, or more importantly questioning, is what was the main factor that created that difference among the different hobbies? Like what is it that created that level of awareness in the spider community, and what is the difference in the ant keeping community, and how can that be bridged somewhat as possible, you know, make it a little bit more even between the two sides? I don't have the answer to that.
So I actually have participated in both ant spiders and I would say most invertebrate hobbies in the past. And I guess this is the way I think the big thing is that, or rather the biggest part is that almost no one knows how to breed ants in captivity. It's generally something that's not known by where like the average hobbyist will not know. The average, like even most pharmacologists don't know. It's something where just because each species has very, very different trigger, where ants, they synchronize their reproductive cycle within a population, and it's specific to that population. And generally that's something that's a lot more difficult to carry over. One way I've heard it compared is like ant keeping is almost like the saltwater tanks of like invertebrate, where you need to get like where, for example, in like breeding corals, you get like the moon cycle right, you get the UV exposure light, so the UV exposure right, the temperature right, the current, and that's really similar. The other thing is the legislative bodies that are involved in like regulating each hobby. So, at least as far as most insects go, at least in Canada, and also the I believe states, and but what that looks like is it's the agriculture. Are you able to...
Sorry. You said
Sorry, I missed
okay.
I had to. Sorry.
Just the YouTube chat got me giggling. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Sorry.
Formicast said Pokeans, gotta catch them all. That is all of it is are wild caught. It was silly.
But yeah, sorry. I wonder if they do significant Pokemon captive breeding. But yeah, so generally we're regulated by like national, state, or government that are saying, all right, no, you can't bring these, right? Generally, people are always or are mainly in their local like jurisdiction or whatever, right? And that's in comparison to the spider hop, where most of the regulation seems to be from like sighting. So at least for Canada, you can import spiders from wherever, whenever, as long as it's okay with like Endangered Species Act and all that. Well, for ants, you can't do it. And I would say that just generally the fact that all of legislative spiders is on concept, whereas for ants, it's a level where whether you can get them at all, I think that makes how hobby value, like the difference between captive bred and wild. And I think it's really important, and we should try to put more captive bred if we can. But I think it's also to recognize that for most of ant keeping, that's just not possible yet.
Right. Sorry. Should have brought some water. What else is there to talk about?
Oh, you have a big list of stuff.
I know. So there was how to source ants responsibly. How do you know you're getting it from a responsible source? The proper care and habitat. So we did touch base a little bit on the gel ant farm. And what is your opinion on how we can get that stuff out of the market? How do we get this gel stuff to stop? I wrote.
It's really hard to get it out of the market because you're basically competing against huge corporations that make toys, not so much pet supplies, right? So,
Right.
And as a toy, again, I'm not defending it, but I'm just thinking about parents, right? As a toy, I can see how parents support anything that has the educational label to it. So those ant farms to a lot of parents are perceived as, oh, this is a healthy thing for my kid to do instead of just playing video games all day long, you know? So I can see how pushing against that, it's really, really hard. But at the same time, I can see how for the ant keeping community, those of us who actually understand what an ant colony needs at the whole process, you right away can say, no, that's not the appropriate environment. But these customers have no clue of that. It's just a toy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dirk, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just saying gel ant farms, the best thing you can do with those is blow them up with fireworks.
Not everybody's gonna go and buy fireworks, Jerica, to blow them up.
Oh, I will.
And I'm pretty sure Toys R Us will kick you out of the store if you try to blow up their toy section.
Watch me.
By the time Toys R Us gets to him, gel farms are gone.
I've never actually seen, and I go to the toy store a lot, not for myself, I promise.
They're Canadian
Maybe a little bit. I don't see them ever. So I don't even
The main part of it is that I see a lot of them, or I hear a lot of customers get them from Amazon. Canadian Tire is another big one. But it seems like the main thing is just because that idea of an ant farm has been so ingrained in their minds, that's kind of what they're actively, I think it's a similar issue to how like the fish hobby is gonna have a lot of trouble getting rid of fish in fish bowls. And I think unfortunately that's just kind of the way that, because culture frames it that way, that's what people perceive of it. And it does reinforce this notion where it's like, oh, this XYZ living organism is a toy and not like a thing that you have to actively care for. But honestly, that's not something that I know well about how to get around either.
Sorry, one of my kids is talking to me. I'm gonna mute for a sec.
Cool. While we wait for that, actually, we can play this ad really quick. So, Canada Ant Colony, Zach is doing a promo code for Formicast. So I'm going to go ahead and play this really quick while they deal with the kids.
Looking to take the next steps into the world of ant keeping? Is there a species you've seen that you're just dying to keep? Check out Canada Ant Colony at canada-ant-colony.com for the widest selection of the unique and awesome world of ant keeping for Canadians. Already experienced? Sign up to be a supplier for at least 25% off all ants and 15% off all supplies, and make some extra cash for your hobby. Check out Canada Ant Colony at canada-ant-colony.com and use code Formicast for 10% off an order today. Looking to take the next...
Alright, there we go. And 10% off, right, Zach? Oh,
I probably just have to leave at around 9:45 or 10ish is all. It's just a matter of how long my battery decides to run.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because, sorry about that.
No worries. I just played your ad for the show, and it said there that there is a 10% off on your store using code Formicast. How long is that for?
Yep. For the next 30 days.
Next 30 days. Alrighty. Cool.
Ooh. Maybe I'll go shop now.
Maybe I'll go shop now.
Don't, Lexi, don't. So how do we help newcomers, or how do we encourage seasoned ant keepers to mentor newcomers so that they have a better chance of succeeding in the hobby?
Well, the problem is, okay, what was their entrance, right? How did they enter the hobby? Because I think how they enter the hobby impacts a lot how we can approach them and coach them. And I mean, they're not easy. These are not easy things to achieve. For example, there's a lot of people that come to the website and they're looking for product. But if you look at the data, we have all this data on traffic to the website. If you look at the data and take a look at how many customers actually go through the sections of the website that contain educational content, resources or information that can impact or change their mindset as to what to purchase or not purchase or when to purchase it, a very small percentage. It's a tiny, minute percentage. I'm talking less than 5%. of people actually spend time reading this information. So for me, that's very concerning. And at the same time, it makes sense. Nowadays, especially with us getting used to the internet and all these media and having access to all of these things, now we don't have the patience to read stuff. So maybe the only way to combat that and compete with that is to create some sort of educational Ants Canada channel, like something that it's very visually appealing, very video oriented, right on your face, kind of like TikTok shorts and things like that, where the whole entire purpose of that content is to 100% distribute educational information so that you put yourself right in front of the person. On the website, I kind of have a project in mind, which again, we just haven't had the time to deploy it, but I keep saying, I think we need to turn everything into videos. So instead of having a guide on how to feed ants, that you have to read through the entire thing, how can we summarize it in a 1-minute video and make it funny and entertaining and musical and, eye-catching and all of those things so that people don't scroll past the video and actually spend time looking at it, right? How to set up a test tube correctly, how to hydrate your ants, how to feed your ants, all of these things that you got to do. Why ant farms, gel ant farms are not good for the ants. Like it seems like we need to figure out how to put all of this content into approachable, accessible, right in your face kind of opportunity. Because if we don't do that, I see how.
Kelly Green wants to know how to convince friends to keep ants. Well, you show them Ants Canada, because that's really what gets them all. Just spam them with Ants Canada video, because it apparently really works really well.
It has worked until this point, yes. But
One way you can do this really well is if you have a large colony at home, ask them to babysit it for like 2 weeks. And from what I'm seeing, that tends to work really, really well. One thing that I've been doing, that for the past little bit, is just distributing large colonies to like pet stores, where it's just, hey, you guys don't have to pay for this. I'll loan you like a really large colony. Let's say they're like 600 workers, and that seems to get everyone that goes in the store really. And that's just because at the end of the day, ants being like a social creature is just, they're by far the most interesting when you have 1,000 of them.
Actually, I have something to say on this.
You're not Canadian. You're not allowed to speak.
Hey, I have family in Ottawa. Don't I count? No, but your question, Kelly, actually about convincing your friends to keep ants. Actually, tomorrow I'm bringing a friend of mine to go anting with me. And that might actually convince him and his brother, Zach, who actually ended up anting with me a couple episodes ago, to go anting. And he might actually start keeping ants too. So take your friends anting with you. There you go. That's one thing.
Yeah. Show them that they can make money by catching ants.
Think about during or not even like substantial amounts of money, but think about during a really big nuptial flight. Like grab a friend during big CS fall flight, and it's really difficult to stop them up.
So when we lived in Stouffville, we used to, not so much here because we live on a main street, doesn't have sidewalks, and then behind us is like a farm field. So we don't really do it much here where we moved to. But when we lived in Stouffville, I used to walk up and down the street looking for ants, and we get the typical, did you lose something? Are you going crazy?
Did you lose your face?
Staring at the floor. Like,
What are you looking for? Oh, just looking around.
You get those kind of questions, but then when you kind of tell them what you're actually doing, it happened to me. There was across the street, there was a teacher who asked me if I lost something, and I told her what I was doing. She then started knocking on my door with cereal boxes with queens inside. She's like, I didn't know where else to put them in, but I found all these queens in my driveway. And then she, I guess, had so much fun doing it that she just continued to knock on my door with random boxes or containers full of Formica queens. And it was all she could find. It was Formica queens all the time. It was just Formica queens. I had 50-something Formica queens just from this lady. And she did it just because she was having fun. She didn't want money or anything like that. But it was just a matter of saying, I'm looking for ants. This is what I'm looking for. Look, see? And then she right away just wanted to help. And then she just found it fun.
yeah.
And then what I also started to do was ask the neighborhood kids to look out for ants. And hey, if you find me a queen ant, I'll give you $1 that you can go and take to George's, which was an ice cream shop, and buy yourself some ice cream. And then their parents would encourage that, and then their parents would find ants and give them to the kids so that the kid can bring to us. And I'm pretty sure the Musselman's community in Stouffville have a few ant keepers now because of us. Or at least they know a little bit more about the hobby, simply because they saw us walking up down the street looking for our keys.
So just to be clear, Yari and Lexi neighborhood, when they lived in Stouffville, like the most idyllic, like almost cottage town you'll ever see in your life.
It was awesome.
Really cute. There's one thing where it's not fun to drive during the winter, but otherwise it was like little like, oh my god.
So where we used to live, it was like dead in the winter. No one. It was like a ghost town. You would see no one. Everybody was stuck at home. You wouldn't see them walking around or whatever. But in the summer, it was so busy because there was like a trailer park, and a lot of people from Toronto had trailers there. So on the weekends especially, it was packed with Toronto people. It's a lake with private access, so you can't access that lake unless you live there or you're at the trailer park. So our house was right off of the lake, and you actually have to drive around the lake to get to our house. And so it was really, really pretty. The only thing you can get to was an ice cream shop that was only open half of the year, and a outdoor patio restaurant that was only open for like 2 months. Other than that, you had to drive everywhere, and lots of trees, and then there was that lake. It was beautiful, and it was the perfect place to. I never found so many ants, queen ants, so easily ever. Like ever. It was just the perfect place to be an ant keeper.
Yeah, I actually had like a little bit of a similar experience, but this was earlier this year, but it went way out of control. So what I did was that I found there were some small towns that, because I already had people kept ants there, especially in like BC and in British Columbia and Alberta, but I would just regularly post like wanted ads, and this was right before the big carpenter ant flights, like across like that northern section of Canada. And what happened was that the news picked it, so it ended up going on like the regional radios, like 3 or 4 of them, and then provincial radio, and then it went national for a little bit. And I think that's something that I guess people don't account for enough is just how impactful, big, and the reason I say that is because I think everyone notices carpenter ants, and that's people that don't. And I was getting overwhelmed, to the point where it was actually messing with my finance, where someone would message and be something like, "Hey, I heard that you were paying for this type of ant," and they'd send me a picture and be a bucket, and the bucket would have 700, and this would happen almost on a daily basis over the course of 3 weeks. But and I thought it was really cool because it's like they tell me about how they stumbled upon it, and it'd be the thing like, oh, well, usually, for example, in some fishing, like those ants flying is what signals I think the start of like trout season, right? So it'd be like, oh, we've seen these every single year. It's actually how we time like a lot of the like, or be a thing where, oh yeah, like this is something that like me and my kids, we work on a farm. This is like one of like the big indicators of spring for us. Or, oh, there's been this huge culling in my yard for years and years, and every single year they release like a bajillion huge ants, and I've always been wondering what the hell those are. And I think that a lot of it is just, I think there's a lot of people out there that are on the cusp of being really into, if even they were just given a little bit more of a push into taking the first step themselves. And in that case, it'd be like grabbing, because a lot of not all of them, but a good amount of those people did end up deciding to like keep a couple on their own just to see how it would work out. And it's really funny because now there's like little towns up there with 10,000 people and like 20 ants, which is, I would say is really, really dense compared to as a whole.
We don't say a boot. We don't say a boot.
A boot.
Darn it. We don't say a boot. It's about.
Be clear.
We have a kid. We have a kid that he would sit right next to his pool. He would sit in a chair next to his pool with his little Scoopy pool thing, and he would Scoopy pool thing, and he would catch ants from his pool. They would fall in, and he would catch them out. He would take them out right away, and he would contact us with so many ants every single time, all from his pool. So if you all have a pool, you go looking for ants in those pools. He was fishing for ants. So let's see. I have a list here of things. It's out and about.
Oot.
Not oot. Oot. What the hell is oot? Oot in a boot. I think they're talking about the Newfies. They like people from Newfoundland sound more like that.
People from Newfoundland.
I would say people from like Northern Ontario do too, to some extent.
Northern Ontario is a bit of an accent.
Yeah, and right now, just because I live in Quebec, the Quebec accent is also something.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and especially in the connecting region, so like New Brunswick, where they have a really unique French accent and a really unique English accent. And you won't understand anything.
I don't understand any French. regardless of the accent. So whatever.
Me neither. Sorry, Francis.
So
Sorry.
right?
No, sir. Continue.
So we encourage the hobbyists to focus on native species. I don't know how Zach feels about this, but we encourage people to keep native species.
I think that's also more of a, and I just say this from conversations, right? It also depends on your level. If you're a beginner and you have no idea how to keep any sort of ants, then I wouldn't advise you to keep ants that are, for example, too tiny or really hard to contain, or that have really specific, like requirements of humidity or nutrition, right? Like, to me, it wouldn't be the wisest decision to go head on with a species that requires a level of experience. So, in other words, I think it has more to do with the capacity of the ant keeper, not so much if the ant is exotic or not. It's if you have experience, you know what you're doing, then yeah, go ahead and try it out. If you're doing it legally, everything is proper and ethical, then why not? But if you have no clue what you're doing, then just don't start there. That would be my.
I would actually. So I can understand the encouraging native species, and I think to some extent, I think that is ideal. I think one really there's like a couple key exceptions, and I think that is that I think having a selection of non-native species in the hobby for longer. The other thing is, I feel that a lot of the species that are exotic I say exotic. What I mean 90% of the time is species that are still technically in Canada, just in really, really small amounts of isolated population. But for example, some of the carpenter ants that we import don't need hibernation. A lot of the ants generally don't need hibernation at all, and that's even if they're species that exist in Canada where the northern populations will hibernate, the southern populations won't. And I know so many people that were like hibernation the worst part of it for them, where they've had like a nice colony growing for 8 months of the year. Something's happened in YouTube chat, hasn't it? I can see the expression.
That's what's going on.
But
But
it's upsetting because putting your colony on hold for 4 months, and also during that time, I feel like that's where a bunch of people would quit the hobby.
Correct.
Hibernation is not like the ants need it, but they don't necessarily get out in the best shape on the other end, and so people would have their colonies wiped during hibernation. So, say they've been keeping ants for a month a couple months or a year or 2 years, and all their progress is erased. A lot of times I find stop, and I find that because a lot of the exotic species just don't have that.
That's Josh.
That's something that I've been pushing for a little bit more, even having stock of species that can be found here, but that are from south, so populations that don't put in the so long. And I think that would make and I think that is making a difference, especially for people that are just getting into the hobby, not needing to take a break for so much of.
But we go back to the big but here.
Yeah.
But they don't know that, and I think that is the problem, right? So yeah, because I totally agree with the diapause being one of the periods of time where people exit the hobby the most, and that experience is not necessarily well received, or people are just not prepared for it. But that's where the irony becomes, right? So I was talking about keeping exotic ants that may have some harder to meet requirements. And again, not all exotic ants have harder to meet requirements, but there are some that do. In my opinion, if you're not capable of setting up diapause correctly and go through that traumatic experience, then you're going to have a hard time in other situations down the road, where if you're buying a colony that requires some ridiculous humidity requirement, for example, that are very, very hard to achieve. And again, for the person with the proper experience, they're not going to be hard. But for somebody that doesn't have that experience, they are going to be hard. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if setting up diapause correctly for your ants is a challenge, then likely you're going to have a challenge with a lot of other things as well. So it does come a lot back to education and the experience of the ant keeper. So I think this is where there has to be this huge disclaimer. If you're going to buy this ant, okay, so here's your checklist. You're going to have to make sure that you check these things on your nest, because your nest has to be escape proof, but not just escape proof. You got to have a better routine of inspection. Are you inspecting the tubing itself? Because even if the nest is escape proof, maybe they're going to escape through the actual tube.
Let me interrupt for a sec.
Not the nest, right?
My battery might die in, say, 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
I'll try to rejoin my phone. I'm not sure, but if that is, have a good. But sorry, continue.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the exotic ant category, depending on the species, right? You are an expert, so of course you would know. I'm putting these species on for sale. Then I would give this huge checklist beforehand. So you say you're going to buy these pieces. Okay, that's great. Amazing, great. Just make sure you follow this checklist. There is these additional requirements with these species. Is not the same as keeping your local Campanatus, Pennsylvanicus. These guys can actually. There's these downsides or these potential risks with this specific species, which is why you should check this on your list, right? So I think that is us, people that are in the ant shop or the side of the business, or that are helping the community grow and do their hobby. Try to give them the warning. And it's hard because you also don't want to sound pessimistic. You don't want to sound like you're telling people, no, you shouldn't buy these species. You also don't want to say that, right? But I also feel like it's a bit of a responsibility to make sure that they understand what they're getting into.
I think it sounds like the point there would just be that probably something that what would make ant keeping more accessible and have more people stay is just having easier ants. But one thing I do find interesting is just because, at least I feel as though in the majority of, for example, the spider hobby, it is mostly exotic species, at least tarantula-wise. I know that's not so much the case for jumpers, though it is a little bit with some of the high-list species or the larger general.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like for a lot of the species that are exotic, just because of at least the current limitations that are on importations, that the vast majority of them aren't. One thing that I do think is a risk, or one species rather, is Tetramorium immigrans, and I think it's funny, or Tetramorium and immigrans and Myrmica rubra, and I think it's funny because those are species that are already in the Canadian environment, and I think that it would be, and I think we should take steps to basically make sure, well, no matter with what species, just generally don't release them. But those two more than.
Another thing that we should touch base on, how ant keeping can impact our environment, and what can we do so that hobbyists can minimize their footprint. And I think the biggest thing that we could do is don't overcatch. Don't overdo it. Don't catch 50, 60, 70, 80 queens in one go.
Yeah. Well, that's a hard thing. And again, it's a lot of psychology here applies. For a lot of us, included me, it's very exciting to be in the middle of a nuptial flight. And it's hunting the ants, hunting the queens, right? It's very, very exciting. So even if you don't need them, even if you don't need the ants, it's still exciting to catch them. So you end up just catching them just because you're there at the moment, and the adrenaline of catching all of the ants is pretty awesome, right? So it's hard to stop that. But the other irony has to do with, and of course, this is going to impact some businesses, right? I, as a business, as an ant shop, if I tell all of my customers, no, you shouldn't buy the ants, you should go and hunt them yourself and just catch what you can keep, right? You shouldn't catch more than what you can keep. Well, then I wouldn't be selling ants. I still send that message, though. If you go to the website, first of all, we are not necessarily the ones dealing with exotics. I think Zachary is doing a good job with that, and there's Formi Studio as well. They're bringing in exotic ants and whatnot. So we just simply choose to not compete with that because somebody is already doing a good job at that. But if you go to our page, the first thing that you're going to find in our live queen ant section is that we only really distribute local species. And second of all, right at the beginning on all text that you find there, in a very summarized way, it says we advise people to go and hunt their own queen ants, and if by any chance you didn't have enough luck, or you couldn't find them, or you don't have enough time, or it was not the best experience for you, you just want to save time, or you want to get ahead of the game and already get your workers instead of waiting for them, then yes, I guess you can buy a colony, right? I still feel like saying that to people, it's important. Say it out loud. Go and try your best to catch your own ants instead of buying them. If I just think as a business person, of course, I'm going to try to convince people to not catch ants and just buy them for me. That's it. But it's not necessarily what we want to say. Like, we want to make people aware and conscious that they have a choice. They don't necessarily have to buy the ant from a store. Again, ironically, in the spider community, entirely the opposite. In the entire community, people tell you that you shouldn't go out there and capture a spider. So complete opposite mindset, right? So
just going back to the conversation that's happening in the chat, I actually do have a cousin in the UK.
Okay. Well, maybe she'll be there.
It's my Tia's son.
Huh.
Yep.
Cool.
So I think he's in London. I think. But that's like the only family. And like I said earlier, the reason iffy about going to ANCON is I haven't been back to Portugal in like 16 years or so. So if my family found out I went to the UK and I didn't go to Portugal, I'd probably get disowned.
Tell us because of ants. I don't understand.
Oh yeah, totally.
Totally.
É por causa das formigas. So let's go back to ants.
Business trip. Business trips is because
Business trip.
Yeah.
How much are tickets?
That's a good question.
How much are ANCON tickets?
Sorry, just to correct myself, because I saw Dirk going through the page. I just remember that I moved not too long ago from the live ant queen section. I moved this information to the actual guide that says what do I need to keep ants as pets.
Oh.
And then I actually expanded that section, and that's where you get the question, how do I get a queen ant? And literally says the best way to start a colony is to capture a newly mated queen right in your surrounding areas during a nuptial flight. The species found in your local area are usually ideal for beginners, and we encourage you to hunt and catch queen ants, as it is an exciting activity. If you acquire too many, then send them over to us. But yeah, that is really
Yeah.
the answer. How do I get a Queen Anne? I don't answer that by saying buy it from us. No, I answer that by, well, go and find a Queen Anne, right? But if you don't, then yeah, there's nothing wrong with buying a Queen Anne.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Is that $30 American or $30 Canadian? Because that matters.
Well, it's in the UK, right? So it's probably pounds.
Well, they no, but there's a dollar sound. It's a sound sign, dollar sign. I speak English, I promise.
Used to be by tiers, but this year it's going to be a bit different. Standard entry is about 30. Either way, it's very reasonable. Good point. I was thinking it is USD. I don't know, but I am definitely going. I'm looking into flights and stuff.
How much are flights for you on your end?
I was looking at flying to Cardiff at first because it's in Wales, but that was around $1,500 for a round trip. A boot, 30ish.
It's it's a boot. It's about. We don't pronounce our T's. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like Toronto. We don't say Toronto. We say Toronto.
It's like Toronto.
No, he doesn't. It doesn't apply to him because he has an accent. He's a fake Canadian. I'm also a fake Canadian, but I've been fake for longer.
My family members that are in Ottawa, they're also fake Canadians, but they think they're real Canadians. So
It's a boot 30.
Well, then again, most of us in America ended up being immigrants at some point.
You mean America?
America.
America.
I too can play this game. I too can play this game. America.
America.
We're all immigrants anyway. So.
Except for the ants, they're here first.
Yeah, the OJs are the local species. Local species of ants.
Right.
That's the OJs.
All right.
Cool.
How can we make ant keeping more accessible and cost effective?
More accessible and cost effective.
And this is when we're supposed to talk about the high turnaround rate, but we already discussed that.
We started with the turnaround.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's hard to answer that question, but the number one, in my opinion, the thing outside of price, especially with equipment, is the fact that a lot of the options of equipment are not necessarily produced here in Canada. Now, that doesn't mean that us, because we're produced here in Canada, we're cheap. I'm also not trying to say that, but yeah, if a Canadian person is buying from us, in some cases they can bypass all of those import fees, and shipping within Canada is not necessarily cheap. Ironically, it's cheaper for me to send something to the US than it is to send it here to the same province where I live, which is mind-boggling. But at least the import fees can be reduced if we produce more merchandise within Canada. So I guess what I'm saying is it would be cool if we had more people in Canada manufacturing equipment, and we just don't see that happening. And I've seen people try, and there's been multiple attempts of people trying to get into the market. I don't know why I haven't seen it work as much or expand as much. I guess it's not easy, and I say that because it was not easy for us.
It's not easy. It's hard. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and what's hard is to provide the quality, maintaining the price low. Like, at the end of the day, if you want the price to be cheap, you need to lower the cost of a lot of things as much as possible. We would probably have to move away from glass, for example. Working with glass is not necessarily the cheapest thing. Magnets, not necessarily cheap, right? So screws are cheaper than magnets, but magnets are more appropriate to be used with at least our technique with the glass. So again, if we price of a lot of things, we change the product to a lower quality product, and that's also not necessarily our mission. The way we started as more art, the fact that we have that label there, art, it's been always one of our objectives to make a product that when you get it out of the box and you look at it, it gives you that wow factor. This looks pretty cool, right? So that takes some money. Talking about imports and the fact that we have imported and exotic ants, well, that definitely does not necessarily cost of the hobby, because getting the permits, importing, the cost of the shipment, all of that is way more expensive than if we capture local ants and just rely on local ants. But we also already spoke about how more experienced ant keepers are more likely to look for the challenge of the exotic ants that they're not acquainted with, right? That they don't have them easily accessible. So of course it's going to be more interesting to them to spend more money on those exotic ants. But it is not necessarily easy to lower them. And then on top of that, the economy is turning the way it's turning, which is just increasing the price of absolutely everything. Soon we're going to have to start paying taxes for breathing or something like that.
I mean, we are in Canada and we pay for taxes, for everything. So that might not apply for everyone, but it does apply for us here in Canada. We pay for literally everything.
And then the other thing that we already do to lower the cost of operating a business, there's no brick and mortar ant shop. Because if we had a brick and mortar location where you can actually enter and have a retail store set up, then that would cost you a lot of money just to maintain the presentation of the open to the public retail store, plus the employees to work in that customer service position, right? So I think all of the ant shops here in Canada, and I'm pretty sure it's not just here in Canada, it's probably everywhere in the world, we already don't necessarily rely with the traditional brick and mortar retail business model, right? And Zachary at the beginning of the conversation was giving some feedback on how he's trying to expand to pet supply stores, right? Like pet chain supply stores, which is a great idea. But he was giving us some feedback precisely saying how they have had to fire people and they had to shrink down their businesses, and there are some of those stores are struggling. Some of those locations had to close. Yes, because in general, all retail in the brick and mortar model is actually having a really hard time surviving. And part of that has to do with the business models like Amazon. Again, not against it, just saying that people are getting very used to buying online and having the items come to their house. It creates a commodity that is very hard to compete against. Especially with COVID, where we groceries straight to your house. So I think talking about the hobby, how to lower the price even more, well, we already don't have the traditional retail brick and mortar location, right? So what's the other thing that an ant keeper don't necessarily have the funds to buy their merchandise? Well, I guess the only other choice left is DIY, do it yourself.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the ant keeping hobby is DIY is not necessarily very hard. It may not look as pretty as you want it to look, especially on your first attempts, and you're going to definitely have some screw-ups, but I think the DIY factor in the hobby is very important, and it shouldn't be disregarded so easily. Again, if I were a salesperson and nothing else, I'll be here telling everybody that they should just buy stuff from us and nothing else, but
you should still.
But I really think it's very important for the ant keeper out there to try to do a lot of their own stuff, their own equipment, their own resources. It definitely teaches you a lot. Trying to do your own things and trying to come up with your own feeding solutions, your own outworlds. There are things that are a little bit easier to come up with by yourself. Doing those things actually also gives you experience, and it helps you become a better ant keeper. So why not, right? Why not? I think a lot of us that have a business keeping, that's exactly how we started. We were not necessarily me, for example, the first time I ever made a nest, I wasn't necessarily trying to make a business. I was just trying to make something for my daughter, and she liked it briefly, and then we were the ones that stayed within the hobby. But my point being is, the other businesses that I know here in Canada also started like that, a lot of experimenting and DIY. Formy Studio, for example, which is a business that just opened here in Canada, I know they first started with a lot of experiments and trying to do their own thing. Zachary, before he had Canada and Colony as a business, same thing. He was playing around and testing things out and DIYing things, and that was very important. I think even Ants Canada, when we look at their origins, the beginnings, when you want to find those videos from back in the back at the beginning, completely different channel, right? And what you see is
the beginning.
What you see is a lot of experiments, right? A lot of experiments and those first nests with plaster and glass and whatnot. I'm pretty sure we look into the ant shops in Europe or in England and whatnot. Maybe there's, I would be curious to know. Maybe Kushi also started as a.
Did you start as
a DIY kind of deal, right? So
make your own nest kind of thing. And on the 7th day, he said.
On the 7th.
All right.
Let there be nests.
It's alright.
So I think that is another way to help the newcomers to the hobby that don't necessarily want to spend a lot of money. You don't have to, make everybody aware that there's a way to also not necessarily have to spend money.
Yeah.
Someone said a naturalistic setup looks stunning. We have an empty tank here for the last year.
That's supposed to turn into a naturalistic setup.
We just need to find the time
to set it up.
Because we are so busy.
Yeah.
So busy. Like, we sometimes he goes to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning because he was like building stuff. Yeah, it's insane. Not complaining. Buy more. Thank you, please.
Yeah, so what Kushi just said right now on the chat, I make stuff for myself and pretty much just make them available to all. And that actually happens to be my same approach. I one day I'm like doing something, I'm like, oh, I wish I had a dish with this and that. Oh, wait a second, I guess I could make it myself.
I think the cotton keeper was one of those moments. Like, I hate this cotton going back. It was like the biggest pet peeve of him was when the cotton in the test tube would
slowly walk backwards.
Would move back and then give the colony too much space, and then they have all this space and the cotton's all the way back there. And it used to annoy him so bad. One day he's like, I'm gonna fix it, and then he created the cotton keeper. And there's a whole lot of test tube add-ons that we have in Pormore, and I think we might be the business that has the most. And it's all because he's trying to fix things that annoy him, and trust me, there's a lot of things that can annoy him.
Yeah, they're not necessarily solutions. It's just one day I get an idea and then I just go for it. It just happens. I go for the idea. It's fun to come up with the idea, and I make it available. If somebody else finds it useful,
great.
If not, then
the cave, the mini. He created that because he wanted a nest specifically for photography.
Yeah. So everybody's always asking, how do you get photos? How do you take those photos without so much glare? And I always say, well, you have to play with your light source, right? If you're taking a picture let's say you're taking a picture with your phone, and here's the lens, and right there is the light. The problem is that the lens and the flashlight are both in the same line of action. They're coming right the exact same angle. The separation between the lens and your light is almost non-existent. So the reflection of that light is going to bounce straight back to the lens. So one of the best strategies to taking a photo without glare on a test tube or on any nest that has a reflective surface. I mean, even if you have museum glass or whatever anti-reflective treatment, you will still get some artifacts. But the best solution is to always point your light at a right angle. So if my lens is coming into this direction, then have your light, say, come from above or from a side angle, so it reflects on a direction opposite to the lens. So the cave basically does that. You have a glass on the top and then a glass on the side. So that way you can point the camera on one side and then your light coming from above. So again, that nest was not necessarily designed first thinking on the ant. That was already figured out prior. It was more, okay, how do I make it easy for me to put a flashlight on top and then have the camera on the side? And turns out that it's, again, I'm not saying it's the best solution ever, just saying it turned out to be a pretty practical solution.
And there's your photography lesson for the day.
Yeah, I am a very passionate photographer, and and I have worked professionally in photography for
That's what we did
more
before
than 10
this.
years, I think. Anything that gets in the way of me taking a photo, I have to figure out an idea behind it.
Now, moving on. The future of the hobby in Canada, the potential growth challenges, and the direction the hobby might take in Canada, and how the community can work together to shape a positive future. I think we mentioned earlier that it's hard owning or making products and serving people in the community. It's difficult. It's just hard. And the last thing you need is other businesses to make it even harder. Like everything, I get like the whole competitive thing, you know. We get along really well with Zach, and we are in the same business. We sell nests and we sell ants, and we're competitive in a way, but we're competitive not in a mean way. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard enough. You don't need a business to make it even harder. You know what I mean? Just be nice, and let your products speak for themselves, and don't trash talk anyone. Is basically, I think, is important to better the community, because we, in the end, people look up to us and to our practices and what we do, and they go out into the community and they do the same. So if they see you being negative towards your fellow ant keepers or your fellow stores, then there's a bigger chance that they will reflect that kind of same attitude. So just be kind and acknowledge that it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That is also why I like DIY.
Yeah.
When people DIY things and they try to do, I get the sensation that the level of appreciation goes up. I mean, a typical example, I had people say, "Hey, how come this now $25? It should be cheaper than that." And in my head, I'm going, I don't disagree with that, but you have no idea how much effort it goes to make that net. You know, minimum wage in Canada is $15, and buying eggs costs more than $15. Taxes are way higher than $15. So that's my point. It's not necessarily that easy, right? And the value is not sometimes perceived very straightforward until you actually try. You know, it takes way longer just to buy the supplies to a DIY project. Just the time sourcing your supplies to get started, which is kind of definitely costs you more than $25. Yeah. But I still think it's a good idea that people try to do their own thing. So if everybody had a better understanding on how the hobby is still relatively in development, there's no perfect one solution applies to every single species out there. And on top of that, the cost of developing those ideas, the time and effort that goes into those ideas, and the quantity of mistakes that everybody has to do to get better at, the ant keeping hobby in general. As the more we have that concept in everybody's head, I think we will all be more helpful with each other, and we'll be more prone to sharing in a more positive sense.
Just be kind.
Yes, I agree.
Be nice.
Yes, be nice.
Be nice, eh?
Play well.
That's the Canadian in me.
Yeah.
I even wore my plaid shirt to look extra Canadian.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Q&A? Any questions?
Any questions from the chat?
Any questions?
Questions.
We will have we'll have snow in 3 months. We could put it up for sale at the shop. The snow.
Oh, the snow for sale?
Canadians. I'm sorry. Because someone said, I think it was Anne's England that mentioned we have snow, so we're already winning. I was just saying that I can sell her some snow.
Gotcha.
In 3 months. Sorry. I only say half of what I'm thinking and expect you to know.
They're selling snow in the actual.
I'll buy some snow from you guys, and the border, like the customs will open up. They'll be like, "What's this? Wait, where's your snow in a box?"
I think by that point it's gonna be water. It's gonna be water.
It would just be a soaked box.
A bunch of water in a jar.
Our summer lasts 2 weeks.
Make sure when you receive your jar that you shake it constantly at minus 20 degrees until it turns into snow again.
Oh my gosh.
It has to be shaken, if not, it's gonna turn into ice.
Right. Any questions for the Canadians?
At least you got 2 weeks. We're already considering putting away emptying the pool because it's been too cold to even.
Well,
get
summer
the
here
kids
only
in.
lasts 2 months. That's it.
No, it's 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, that's true.
You can take her snow. Yeah, please do. We have tons.
Yeah, take our
And then this year our summer was more rainy, and there was less sunny days than at least what I would call average. So
we had a drought during we had a drought over here in Michigan.
We have
Really hot.
sorry, go ahead.
Really hot and dry.
Not here. I feel like we were cheaped out for our summer this year.
yeah,
We have the expo,
well, it's more like a reptile expo.
Yes, there's a reptile expo.
In Canada and Colony, joining that reptile expo quite often, but there's really not like a ant keeping section. It's just Canada and Colony. That's it. For us, the challenge has production. During the low season for us, which is winter, so November to March, February, it's easy to generate overstock and have merchandise ahead of time. And then March, April comes in, and then the business starts to ramp up in sales. So then 2 months or so pass into the season, and then stock. On top of that, the level of customization on the products is huge. So one order can be completely different from the second order, even though they may have relatively the same items. So what I'm trying to say is that right now, merchandise is being produced on demand, and we produce more of what's being ordered more, and we produce less. It's not as popular. So in order for us to go to to an expo in the middle of the BC season, it's very hard because we already have more than what we can handle. So to put aside some extra effort to prepare all this extra merchandise that you're going to bring to the expo without you really knowing if the right merchandise to bring or not, it's been a challenge for us. Now, with that being said, we are expanding. We are a business that is growing. There's more people getting incorporated into the business, more employees, and we are hoping that next year, definitely not this year, or maybe by the end of the year, but next year, we're hoping that we can make our presence in the expos and be able to step out of the workshop while we have employees here continuing to work on the orders, and we're able to go to the expo and bring ourselves to the public. The other thing that we want to do, and Lexi, this is making an actual event or expo or convention, not sure what to call it.
Well,
that is just for Antkeepers, but we're still not sure how to do that.
I joked around and I said I was going to call it Ant Can. Ant Can. Ha! I'm so funny.
Instead of Ant Con?
Yes.
I see.
Ant Can. How about that, huh?
How about
Eh?
that?
How about that, eh? I think I could get a venue to put something together. I'm not going to call it Ant Can. That was a really bad joke. But I think I could get a venue put together. I think maybe I should contact Zach. Because as much as I want to go to Ant Con, and maybe I can, and maybe Formicast can, but not everybody can.
Correct.
So, and to boot.
Okay.
So, I would prefer to do it in Canada versus the United States of America. Because we are not as restricted in Canada as they are in the States. So if we, for example,
traveling,
right, yeah. For example, if we were to go and do something in Michigan, then only Michigan people could bring in ants to show and sell and whatever. And how many ant keepers are in Michigan that are willing to put up a stand and show off their ants? Like maybe Formicast, and that's it. But at least in Canada, if someone is willing to travel to and can, they could bring some ants. Because we can at least travel with our ants within Canada.
You can cross state lines. Well, we don't have states, but the equivalent of state lines.
Province.
You can cross state lines without
province
breaking the law. Where in the U.S., it's supposedly not allowed. I say supposedly because I don't know how much about it. Actually, don't follow the rule. I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure there's a gray line, like everything in life. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Any more questions? Should we move on?
Any questions?
No. Doesn't look like it. Cool.
Having colonies to display would be hard. Well, we do have Zach. Like, we have ourselves and we have Zach. And Ontario has quite a few ant keepers around this area, like down here. So I think we could find a few colonies to display.
The biggest concentration of ant keepers happens to be located in Ontario.
Yeah.
So it's good that we're located in Ontario. And again, Canada Ant Colony, Formy Studio, also located in Ontario. So I guess maybe we should make some sort of convention or something, because at the end of the day, the game players are located in Ontario, and most of the customers are located in Ontario. So
yeah,
probably there's a way to get that.
Call events.
Then again, everybody's super introvert, so maybe just go to this event and everybody stays home. So we will not find out until we try it.
I mean, what's the population of Canada?
Almost none compared to the US.
Yeah. But we're close enough where you can border, right? We're about stop it. We're about an hour and a half-ish from Niagara Falls. And then about 3 hours away from the Michigan border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends how fast you drive.
So,
But we're about to hit the 40 million mark, which again is not a lot. I think that 38 number that you're saying,
we have a lot of land, not a lot of people.
It's kind of like pandemic number, but with all the immigration that's happening lately and whatnot, I think we're probably closer to 40 now. Oh, there you go. So yeah, 2021. When I first came to Canada, I think we were closer to 30 to 31. And that was 13 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't remember. So
yeah,
40 is still not a big number. Yeah, 40 is still not a big number.
Where's that? You had a cat that was not Sasha. Who was that cat?
That's that's Whittycomb. That's my roommate's cat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, is Sasha aware that you're petting another cat?
Yeah, she's aware. Yeah.
Oh, look, with 65 million UK, we managed to get 65 to come to the first ANCON. So then we're probably going to get 30 people to Canada Con. that includes her and me, Curry, Thomas, Beans, you know. So that's already 5-7 of us.
Kelly Green will go. Kelly Green, you'll go, right?
There we go. So
Sweet,
and
so
super.
let's all go to ANCON together.
All the people on the Discord channel will probably be the ones to show up.
Yeah, I think we could pull a lot of people from the States. I do think that we could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like, Texas, right? Because I've had, like, this thing in Texas, and I was looking at driving from Texas back to Toronto, and it would take 26-ish hours from Texas to Toronto. We're not in Toronto. We're
closer to the border.
We're closer to the border, so it would be a little bit less, maybe 23 hours. Maybe about 23 hours. But Texas is all the way down there, so I mean, it's drivable. You don't even need a flight, necessarily.
I see what you mean. Texas being the furthest south,
Yeah,
right?
like
So there's a lot.
Yeah.
So why not?
And it's drivable from Texas, so I'm sure ant keepers from around the U.S. would come.
And not thinking about the other businesses, which I'm pretty sure the businesses inside of the U.S. probably sell more than us to the U.S. But we do have a good amount of people ordering from the U.S. And yes, most of the orders that we get from the U.S. are relatively closer to the border. Then again, there's merchandise going all the way to California, which is a little bit further away than where we are located. So Virginia is another place where we get a lot of orders from. I don't know why, but California, Virginia are for us very predominant. You see those locations very often on orders. Again, I have no idea why. I have no idea why Virginia and California.
For ant shops, there's not a lot going on in Canada. We are one of them, and then there's Zach for Canada Ant Colony. There's a new store called Formy Studio. He's pretty new. He's just a few months old. And then
Age-wise?
Yeah, store-wise, not
Hey, Zach.
and then there's Nugs and Bugs, or Nugs and Bugs, something along those lines. But they're pretty new as well, maybe about a year old-ish.
Nugs Bugs Inc.
But-
yeah.
I don't know how active they are. I don't think they have a lot of marketing going around, so they might be
Right.
they might not be very known. And then there's what's that other store? The one that called you? Something Canada. No, not Ants Canada. Something Canada.
Canada something.
For Me Canada?
Oregon?
Is that what it's called? For Me
That's the
Canada?
other business that has the word Canada in it. So
I guess then that's the one. For Me, they were around and then they kind of died off, and I think they're now coming back. I'm not exactly sure, but that's pretty much it. Like actually around for a while, I think is just basically us and Zach. Like I think those are the two solid ant stores in Canada. And Zach is older than us, like store-wise.
Not age-wise.
Store-wise.
But yeah, I think with Kushi, that's what I was trying to say with the US stuff as well. Yes, that maybe it's also a matter of getting some people from the US, the businesses from the US, to merge with the businesses from Canada and make this bigger event across the two sides. The US does definitely have people in the manufacturing side, right? Fabricating merchandise, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something that we need to kind of. I think what we need to do, Wakushi, is get in touch with you guys over at AntCon and kind of be like, "Yo, what do we got to do to like what's like behind the scenes?" And then maybe work together in that sense, right? Like we can have you can have the AntCon, you can have something pretty much the same over here and kind of promote each other in a way.
The equivalent.
Yeah.
And probably
Like,
cheaper
instead of working against each other, kind of work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe down the line, and because I know there's a couple people trying to work with the government here in the U.S. to make things a little bit more accessible. Hopefully, here in the next couple of laws, things will be better for us here in the U.S. So we'll see. But yeah, we definitely need some type of event in North America. Either that's here in the U.S. or in Canada, or both. But
Yeah, that's true.
No, you
And-
wouldn't be allowed.
What is the main thing that you guys are working to change in the U.S.? Just out of curiosity, you know.
Well, I know, especially right now with like the specific pogos being the only species of ants that are allowed to be transported between the 48 continental states. I know they're looking at seeing like what other colonies there are, or what other type of species that can be added onto that list. I know, for example, like I was talking in chat, if I wanted to get, let's say, if I wanted to buy honeypots from Vern, for example, I would have to. I actually tried doing this, and then some stuff came up, and I decided to wait. I would have to fill out a permit from the USDA, and then they would have to send someone over here to make sure that I had like a way of preventing escape, so they wouldn't escape and do something into the environment.
Which is a conundrum, yeah.
Yeah. But luckily, it's so cold in Michigan in the winter that it doesn't really,
They wouldn't
make a
even
difference.
try. Yeah.
But still, like, I guess they have to go through that length of protecting the environment. But
You just show them the snow. Here, this.
Yeah.
This is what will prevent them.
Yeah, just look at all the snow everywhere. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure there's other things. But at the top of my head, I really don't know. I'm sure that's probably for the next episode where we talk more about U.S. stuff. But cool.
We're in Canada, eh?
Yeah.
Unless they escape and they pack your house with ants, even though they cannot leave your house because still you have an infestation there.
All right. Like Sadie said, come see AntCon and be good to see what it's all about. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. So where are we at? We're at call to action?
Okay, so how about this? Dirka,
What?
you pay for my flight and I'll go.
I gotta pay for my own flight too.
Hey, but I have family there, so you know. I bring the family. Well, I mean, I can borrow a car, or I can convince them around, or whatever.
We'll figure something.
Stay, you know. I just don't want to pay 1,400.
Let me just not eat for the rest of the next 6 months. I couldn't buy a full ticket.
The thing is that I have kids, and then I have a husband, so then I'd have to bring them along, and that gets expensive.
Yeah.
If someone else offers me the flight and it's a gift, then it's like out of my hands, you know?
Right?
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
But we did talk about it. We did talk about going to AntCon.
Yes.
Yeah.
That'll be cool. I'm gonna do a knee reveal. There.
Both More Art and Canada Ant Colony are larger than the US ant stores, except Tar Heel Ant. Yeah.
You mean in volume of sales?
In popularity, I think.
Or yeah,
Yeah.
or popularity.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, especially because, well, again, we for more art may be a little different because our number one revenue is not the live animals, not the specimens, is the merchandise. And for us, that's cool because we don't have the restriction of the border.
Right.
So a lot of people do try to buy ants in our business from the US, which we don't go through that headache. And most of those customers don't have permits to buy the ants to begin with, but that's a small percentage of people that try to buy the ants.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, all of the merchandise that leaves Canada it's hardware. So I can see how not just selling to the small population in Canada and being able to send merchandise worldwide has made the business grow quite strong, which is good. Good.
Yeah.
Zach, we need to do an ant can. No, it's not funny.
Not funny. No.
The logo has to be a pop can.
Pumpkin.
Yeah. So where are we at? We at call to action?
Yes, call to action.
Call to action.
Conclude with a call to action, encouraging listeners to get involved in local clubs, participate in responsible ant keeping, and continue to learn and grow within the hobby. So y'all,
be nice with each other. Yeah. Be nice with.
We don't have any local clubs, but we want to start some.
Ant club.
Well, at least we have the Discord and the Facebook communities, which are nice to have.
So a good places to go for information would be the servers.
Yeah.
The Discord servers, our websites. So like Zachary has some pretty good information on his. We have some pretty good information on ours, especially for new ant keepers. There's also the Formiculture. Formiculture has some pretty good information. Pretty helpful people, I think, for the most part.
Right.
And then there's obviously Formicast podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean,
That's what I'm here for.
I'm part of it, so obviously it's amazing. Oh, that's too funny. And then I think that kind of ties in with those the resources and links. So you can always contact us on our website. There's a chat box. So if you want to talk to a 95% chance it would be me, or there's the Discord, and there's Instagram, Facebook. And we also have our little tiny section on Formiculture. So any of those platforms to contact us, and any of those platforms would also give you good resources and information.
Cool. All right. Time to wrap up this episode, folks. I want to thank former Art Canada and Colony for coming out and doing this fabulous show talking about betterment of ant keeping in Canada. So we're going to do the plugs at the end of the show. It seems like I've been enjoying that a lot more, doing it at the end of the show. So simple, tell people, share on social media, share any of my stories on Instagram, and I'll tag you. Tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, your classmates, your girlfriends, your boyfriends, your lovers, your ex-lovers. Anyone you see on the street, tie a sign around a stray dog or cat. Just kidding, folks, don't do that. At your nearest pet store or while you're anting, tell people about the show. Leave a review on any audio listening platform that you're using, 5 stars, and a written review on iTunes, and I'll read it on the show. Join Discord and come hang out with the hosts and other ant keepers from all around the world. And for all things Formicast, you guys know where to go, formicastpod.com. And we got a couple things to come. So this Betterment series, the USA, has been postponed. We're actually going to be working with, we got a special guest coming on, but we want to iron some things out with him. And then in a couple weeks, we'll get a date for that. It's not going to be live. It's going to be pre-recorded, so it's going to be more focused on the group of people that are going to be meeting. I got an episode tomorrow that I'm recording, and that's going to be episode 13, and that's going to be a non-ant keeping perspective with my buddy Micah, which I'm thinking about recording that while we're eating sushi, so that might be something different.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, so we're gonna try that. Hopefully hopefully it's not too loud and noisy there. Shorten that? Yeah, I might have to shorten that.
He just needs to pre-record it and just
and just put it in there. Yeah. And I tend to read that and kind of make it up as I go. So yeah, I said episode 14 is actually coming up next week. Yeah. So I'm actually having a guy from Canada on, and we're gonna be talking about pest control and some other cool stuff. And then Labor Day, we're taking that week off because I'm gonna go anting on Labor Day. And then the following week, for September 15th, we are celebrating 3 years as a podcast. So we're going to be hanging out and having a couple drinks and celebrating. And yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to be inviting a lot of people on that have been on the show before. And yeah. So. Alright, folks, that's pretty much it for this episode. This has been fun. That's Portermore, and this is Dirka. And that's pretty much it for tonight. Formicast.
Peace.
See ya.